Our reading today is from Colossians chapter 3 verse 22 to the first verse of chapter 4. Servants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in singleness of heart, fearing God. And whatsoever you do, do it heartily, as to the Lord, and not unto men, knowing that of the Lord ye shall receive the reward of the inheritance, for ye serve the Lord Christ. But he that doeth wrong shall receive for the wrong which he hath done, and there is no respect of persons. Masters, give unto your servants that which is just and equal, knowing that ye also have a master in heaven. The relationship between servants and masters, employees and employers, has not always been a happy one. There's a lovely picture of Boaz and his servants in the Old Testament, where it's touching to note the cordial relationships that existed in Ruth chapter 2 verse 4. Boaz came from Bethlehem and said unto the reapers, The Lord be with you. And they answered him, The Lord bless thee. Employers who want the best for their employees and employees who want the best for their employers are not unknown nowadays, but we rarely hear about them. The relationship between masters and servants, which were in fact slaves in New Testament times, was quite different to the relationship between employers and employees that we have nowadays. However, the Christian principles are enduring and very applicable in our different situation. Paul writes to Christian servants, whether or not the master is a believer. What he wants to underline to them is their obligation to do an honest day's work. The idea in eye service is exactly what it says, working when the boss is looking. When I worked in shorts in the 1980s, there were times when the staff were standing around chatting about everyday things, football and the weekend. When one of the bosses appeared, the code word "fugoid" was spoken so that everyone would know to change the conversation to work-related things. That is a form of eye service. These slaves probably couldn't expect much of a reward from their masters, no matter how hard or how heartily they worked. Paul reminds them that they cannot lose out. The Lord takes note, and of the Lord ye shall receive the reward of the inheritance. Verse 24. In fact, Paul points out in the same verse that the Lord is their real boss. Ye serve the Lord Christ. That kind of understanding might radically change my attitude to my boss and to my pay and conditions at work. Paul underlines a similar point for masters. They should always remember that they are not ultimately at the top of the tree. Paul writes in verse 1, Ye also have a master in heaven. The word translated masters 3 times in these verses is exactly the same word as is translated the Lord on another 3 occasions in these verses. Each of those 3 is a reference to our Lord Jesus Christ. If I remember the patience and kindness with which the Lord, my master, has treated me, it will help me to treat my workers well too. For those of us who are bosses, Paul also underlines the importance of equity in dealing with employees. There's been a great drive for equality of opportunity over the past 50 to 100 years, but this has always been a requirement for Christians. Prejudice and favouritism has no place in our behaviour. On a total of 6 occasions, Peter, James and Paul remind us that with God there is no respect of persons. Verse 25. These things are easy to say. They are difficult to do. However, hold tight, because Paul has more to tell us in the following verses and more challenges too.